Hey, I'm Creech and this is Creech and Cars. Today I'm going to be going over everything we know so far about the upcoming electrification of the Porsche 718. On this channel I talk about car news, history, and culture, and in this video I'll go over the potential interior and exterior design of the fully electric 2025 Porsche 718 Boxster / Cayman. Also go over the possible features and performance specs, and then I'll compare it to the competition to see if Porsche can compete with a fully electric sports car. But first, here's a basic overview of the current gas 718 model. Most of you are familiar with the Boxster, Roadster, and Cayman Coupe as being Porsche's entry-level sports car. Although these nameplates don't carry the iconic status and history of the 911, the Boxster is still a very important car in the history of Porsche and was instrumental in creating the modern Porsche automaker we know today, as it gave Porsche a huge boost in sales and revenue in the late 90s and early 2000s when the company was struggling. When the second generation was introduced in 2005, it came with the fixed roof version called the Cayman. And this convertible and coupe duo gave Porsche a more solid financial footing, and they became the well-known models that they are today. In 2016, the current generation, internally known as the 982, was debuted with a 4-cylinder engine when all the previous models used 6 cylinders. The model was also given the 718 prefix to the Boxster or Cayman nameplate. Despite the smaller engine, the Boxster and Cayman were better than ever, and the 982 is still the current generation now. It seems the 982 generation will last until about 2025, and then we will get both a new ICE 718 and a new electric 718. The first glimpse of electrification we got to see from the 718 came in the form of the Cayman GT4e Performance that debuted in May of 2022. The GT4e Performance is an all-electric, high-performance prototype of the Cayman that Porsche has used at numerous events to test out the racing capability of a fully electric car and gather valuable data to use in the eventual production of the electric 718. This GT4 uses a synchronous motor on each axle, and they combine to produce 1,008 horsepower. The motor assembly and battery were fitted onto the standard Cayman GT4 chassis, but Porsche designed about 6,000 parts from scratch for the electric version to adapt the chassis to the powertrain for the best racing performance. Even though EVs are typically significantly heavier than ICE cars, the E-Performance weighs in at about 3,400 pounds, which isn't bad at all. Do keep in mind though that a volume-based Model 17 will likely have a nicer interior and just be heavier overall than the track-focused version. So if the GT4e Performance is a prototype for an electric 718, what would the actual production model be like? Well, let's start with the exterior design. We actually have some spy shots of the Boxster variant, and as you might have guessed, there isn't a huge difference in the design when you compare it to the gas version. And you probably expected this. Porsche has some of the most iconic design characteristics and cues of any automaker, and going electric will certainly not change Porsche's design language. In these spy shots from Motor Authority, we can see a blacked out Boxster with mismatched rims. There's a decent amount of camouflage to obscure the most significant changes to the design, but taking a look at the front end, we can see large air curtains and reworked headlights that look a little more similar to what we've seen on the Taycan, and not as bubbly looking as classic Porsches. The side profile is pretty similar to what we've seen from the Boxster since its inception, and as we move around to the back, it looks like Porsche is moving away from the light bar with the tiny rectangular LED taillights on this model, and then there is a more traditional looking third brake light where the body meets the top. Below that, there is a strange looking bumper, and it almost looks like they don't have the final bumper done yet, or didn't have it on when testing out this particular example. But one of the most interesting things here is the single center mounted exhaust tip. This has caused some debate online as to whether or not the 718 EV will have some sort of simulated exhaust, or if this is just a fake tip that was put on there to fool people who might see it out on the street. Porsche definitely has an exhaust assembly of sorts that is designed for EVs, but we're not sure if that will be put to use immediately on the 718. Also, people who saw the 718 in person reported that it did not have any sort of exhaust noise or other added sound to it. Unlike the exterior, we really haven't seen anything regarding the new 718's interior. But as with the exterior, we can expect the interior to maintain a lot of Porsche themes and still have the same general look of the 982, just maybe with some more screen area that goes with the addition of things like a fully digital gauge cluster and a larger infotainment screen. A look at the Taycan's interior compared to the Panamera could give a reference point for where Porsche will take the interior of the 718. So that's the design. Now let's talk about some potential features. Obviously, the 718 isn't feature-packed and luxurious when compared to models like the Cayman or Taycan, and is instead more of a pure sports car / roadster experience. And I don't think electrification will change this. I think the potential features that would be worth noting are things like drive mode and personalization settings. Having a motor on each axle provides some variability with how the power is put down, and that can be controlled through preset drive modes or through a more complex custom drive mode to tailor the feel of the car to the individual driver. While storage and interior room might be increased slightly, the 718 will still be a pretty compact sports car, and the focus will remain on the driving experience rather than interior comfort and practicality. A core part of how the car drives will be determined by the power the motors make and how much you can actually drive it. So let's get into some performance details. Unlike the other upcoming Porsche EVs that are going to be based on more generic platforms available from Volkswagen, Oliver Bloom has stated that the 718 will have its own unique chassis, although many parts of it will come from other platforms already extant in Volkswagen's large pool of choices. The batteries are expected to be stacked behind the seats, similarly to how the flat engine is positioned in the gas version now. This would allow the driver to sit very close to the floor if there aren't batteries or any other significant parts underneath the seats. The 718 should have a range of at least 250 miles. And while it would be lighter than most EVs, the smaller dimensions mean less space for a battery pack. And this could mean the range will be on the lower end of the spectrum, but it could cross the 300-mile mark on the higher end. The GT4e Performance battery could charge from 5% to 80% in 15 minutes with a DC fast charger, and the top spec production 718 should get the same capability. The base model will likely come with just one motor on the rear axle, which is how the Taycan base comes now. The base 718 EV should hover around the $80,000 mark. And for the money, the base model with one motor could provide around 400 horsepower and a 0 to 60 time of 4.5 seconds or less. The base Taycan does 0 to 60 in about 5 seconds, but with much less weight, I think the 718 should target the 4-second mark for the base model and obviously get as low as possible on the higher spec models. And speaking of those higher spec models, the top trim should be the GTS version, which we can expect to add another motor on the front axle and a lot more power with it. The current Taycan GTS offers 590 horsepower, over 600 pound-feet of torque, and a 0 to 60 time of 3.5 seconds, and I would expect the 718 to be fairly similar, along with unlocking more track-focused aerodynamics and drive modes. The GTS model should max out over $100,000 as well. So even though many details are still fuzzy, we can put together a general outline of what a fully electric Porsche 718 Boxster and Cayman would look like and feel like. So let's compare it to the competition and see if it can continue to be an important model for the Porsche brand and its finances. While the Boxster and Cayman have been great decisions when you zoom out to a broader timeline, in recent years sales have been slowing down. Obviously SUVs are more important now than ever before, which I covered in more detail in the K1 video, but I think that the 982 is clearly an aging model, and this has decreased interest in new 718s. Once Porsche was able to increase the production output for the Taycan, it quickly outsold both variants of the 718, despite being a good bit more expensive. This shows that there is a solid demand for an electric Porsche, and while I don't think the 718 EV will ever beat out the Taycan due to the lack of practicality, I do think the release of a next generation, coupled with the excitement of the option for an electric version, will sharply increase sales for the 718. However, the 718 EV will face some heavy competition. With the more exotic styling of the C8, the Corvette is now a bigger threat to Porsche than ever before, and is following a similar trajectory of electrification. To beat the Corvette, Porsche will have to rely on its stronger brand name, racing heritage, and reputation for superior craftsmanship and engineering to beat out the strong value proposition put forth by the Corvette C8. Another competitor is the Lotus Emira, which is also the most direct competitor to the Cayman and Boxster. In the past, Porsche has been able to leverage its large dealership network and conglomerate backing to have no trouble beating out anything put forth by Lotus, but as the smaller company is now backed by Geely and Etika, it has the potential to become a bigger threat to Porsche. Other rivals do come from the higher trim models of sports cars like the Z4 or Camaro, but Porsche Porsche has built up a client base that prefers the premium brand name and unique driving feel associated with Porsches. Overall, I think the 718 is overdue for its next generation, and this rework provides the perfect opportunity for Porsche to introduce an electric sports car along with a brand new gas-powered 718. So that's everything you need to know about the upcoming electric Porsche 718 Boxster / Cayman. On this channel, I talk about car news like this, as well as car culture and history, like the one time Porsche unveiled a convertible version of the Cayman and almost put it into production. You can find that video in the card in the corner of the screen. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.